Good morning. I'm Pete Najarian. This is The Take for Market Rebellion. And on this Tuesday morning, we come off a Monday that was very interesting because when you look at Monday's trade, a lot of it was really driven by what? Gold and silver. We talked about this all the way back into April, in late April, and then we started getting into it in late May once again, where we called it the Burl-Ives trade. Well, silver and gold, they're back once again, and they've been running. And it's not just a 1 week, 2 week, 1 month thing. This has been something that's been going on. As I say, you go back to April and specifically when you get into May, that's when we started seeing just incredible amounts of buying in the SLV, the GLD, and many of those various miners. Well, they've absolutely taken off and exploded to the upside, so you can understand why today we're seeing a little bit of a breather. But yesterday, what were we seeing in gold? Well, got up around 1950, so that's a significant number. We were talking about the 1700s not that terribly long ago. Silver exploding finally to the upside, maybe making a little catch-up trade into the gold move that's been moving so much swifter. And suddenly you see silver up there above 25 and a half. This has been an unbelievable run. We had silver not too terribly long ago, about $5, $6, $8 lower than that. So this is a very rapid run. Now you've got volatility in this marketplace, still kind of hanging around as well. Still sitting around 24.75, somewhere near, call it 24, 25, and actually on the higher end, when we do see some hiccups here and there, we've seen the volatility index get up towards 27, 28, and that sort of a range. But what that's even been contracting, and we've talked about some of the contraction in terms of the movement. Well, that's starting to show a little bit of a contraction in terms of this volatility index. Now, I've been using about a 5-point wide sort of a spread, and maybe that's starting to shrink down a little bit more itself. And as a matter of fact, that could be contracting down. Maybe we're looking at a volatility index now, something closer to a 24 to 27 type of range. But that's barring earnings season and all that goes into the factoring of so many different things right now. Obviously, there's a package going around, and they're going to be fighting over this over in Washington, D.C. for a while. So there's all kinds of different things that could possibly move this markets and obviously move that volatility. Now, the volumes that we've been talking about, and we were talking about so much volume, we continue to have incredible amounts of volume, but slowed down a little bit once again, where we're trading closer to 25 million as opposed to 30 million, but still 25 million contracts in a day. That's an unbelievable number, and the pace for 2020 is extraordinary to say the very least. Still, gold yesterday, new highs. Silver yesterday, new highs. As a matter of fact, you take a look at the GLD, 182 bucks, SLV around 22.80. So a nice big move to the upside. We had even seen some movement in the overnight markets, but not a lot of that's holding on this morning, as we're seeing a little bit of that paring back of some of that run. But with that, we also had the Dow moving to the upside. We had the NASDAQ moving to the upside, and the Dow finished up about 0.5%, a little less than 0.5%, but a lot of what was powering that, well, some of those NASDAQ names that sits in the Dow. So you got Microsoft, you got Intel, you got Apple, you've got Cisco, those kind of names. Sorry, I did not mean to say Intel, but you know what I'm talking about. Apple, Cisco, Microsoft, those are the names that from the tech side of things were trading really well yesterday. Dow, 3M, Caterpillar, you had the industrials were also working. So then we flip over to the NASDAQ itself. That was up significantly. Now, we talked about the Dow being up about 0.5%, give or take. You look at the NASDAQ, 173 points. Now, we're talking about something that's trading in the 10,000. So that's a under 2% move, but about a 1.7% move to the upside. And what were some of the names that were powering that? You had Tesla. You had Biogen with that double upgrade to the upside from Morgan Stanley. You had ASML. You had KLC Tencor. You had QCOM. You had Xilinx. You had Applied Materials. You had NXPI. Where am I going with that? Well, this is an SMH sort of a rally. When you look at really what was powering a lot of the NASDAQ, we're talking about the semiconductors, which, by the way, you look over at the SMH, that was up 4% yesterday. That was a monstrous move from names like Lam Research and Qualcomm and Applied Materials, NVIDIA, all those kind of names. And then we talk about the broadness of the market, and I started to hear yesterday again talking about the narrowness of, well, there's 4 or 5 stocks powering it. All right, well, take a look over at the biotechs as well. The biotech indices, the XBI was up about 2.6%, the IBB up about 2.6%. So you're seeing the chips, you are seeing biotech. Yes, you are seeing the big names. We talked about Tesla, we talked about Apple, we talked about Microsoft, Cisco, those big names participating, but Also, there was a lot more of a broad participation than I think gets credit for a lot of the time. Biogen yesterday was up 5%. Regeneron was up almost 5%. Alexion was up over 5%. So give you a little idea of just the power of what some of the moves looked like yesterday in the biotech aspect of things. And obviously that's reflected when you look over at those indexes. So today, pressure on the markets early. Will that sustain? So far this morning, we opened up on the markets. We were down about 120 points on the Dow. We're down about 40 points on the NASDAQ. We went a little bit further than that, but now seeing a little bit of a comeback a little bit right now. Dow down about 71 points. It was down closer to 180 points not too terribly long ago. We're less than 45 minutes into the trading session, and we're starting to see a little bit of a pull off of those lows right now. Now, the NASDAQ continues to be down about 40 points, so that hasn't moved a whole lot, but the Dow certainly is shifting around. So where are we seeing gold? Gold's off a little bit, but still trading about 19 and a quarter. Silver trading about 24. Yes, it was up over 25 and a half. This has been a sprint, not a marathon, but a sprint from silver. And crude still hanging around 41. So yes, all three are off a little bit today, but not off anything significantly. And you see volatility with this move to the downside right now, and what was looking like a bit of a sharp move to the downside for a moment there. So you're seeing volatility hanging around, well, right now looking like it's almost unchanged, but it was up around 25, maybe even a little bit higher than that. So what's some of the powerful moves that we're seeing? Well, we talk about this being the strongest week for earnings season, and it is. And take a look at what's really shifting around in the Dow right now. You got names like 3M, that's an earnings name, down 5%. You got McDonald's down about 2%. We've got Raytheon down a little over 1%. But on the flip side of that, you got Pfizer moving to the upside. You have Merck moving to the upside. So it's not like the entire index, but there are big portions of the index, and a lot of that related to earnings. Pfizer's earnings were out. Pfizer actually in the positive, as I mentioned. So the chip stocks. Today, flip side of what we saw yesterday. Yesterday we were up, I said, about 4% in the SMH. Today, down a little over 2.5%, something like that for the SMH. And it's a lot of the usual suspects and a couple names we don't bring up. So I'll point out NXPI, Qualcomm, Xilinx, Micron, Texas Instruments, Microchip, NVIDIA. Those names all kind of sliding a little bit, and those pulling on the SMH and pulling on the NASDAQ as well. So a lot of that really showing what's really going on internally in the markets right now. Now, and earnings that's really, really positive. And this is a name we've talked about. Matter of fact, my son and I consistently have been done this boots on the ground thing. I've been doing it my whole life. I've been doing it specifically while I've been in the stock market since 1992. But I can tell you this, you go and you see for yourself and you go around. We do this all the time. We did some fun videos over this past pandemic since that started, just to show the progress, what's going on, what's being allowed, all that type of thing, and who's actually prospering. If you go back, you could see we were focusing on Target and Walmart and Costco and Sam's Club, all of which did extremely well. But the other area, one of the areas that we got into when we got into the spring, boating. Now, who really had made a great move not too terribly long ago? Minnesota company right down the street here, not too terribly far from here, Polaris, made a huge acquisition of Bennington. So along with that, they got all kinds of other different types of boat makers. Well, all that being said, came out with earnings. Their earnings pretty spectacular. You take a look at where that stock is today, it's up about 9%. This is something where when we had gone out to a couple of the different shops, we also discovered that in normal times, this time of year, you'd see monthly sales of, call it $1 million in a month, or per week rather, $1 million per week in terms of sales. That was pretty consistent. You know, there's obviously some dips and so forth. This year, averaging closer to $4.5 million. I mean, it just gives you a little idea of how much folks have adjusted, and with social distancing, they're buying boats, they're buying all kinds of different products. There's the four-wheelers, there's all kinds of crazy things, but they've got it all. So they've got the recreational vehicles that everybody wants, they've got the boats, and in the wintertime, obviously they've got those as well. So that acquisition, though, I think was huge, and that's why I think you're seeing a great reaction from the stock and a report that has people pretty excited. Stocks up, like I say, Polaris, up about 9% today. So we love to hit a little unusual option activity, so I got to hit this one because while the markets were getting hit a little bit harder than they are right now, we've slid down a little bit more, but we've cut the low end of the day probably in half right about now. But it's pretty interesting to see. And you look over, some of those Chinese names are actually in positive territory in the green. Some of them a little bit brighter green than others. But Huya, Huya. Now, this name is hit on other occasions as well. This is extremely short term. Today's Tuesday. These expire on the 31st. That's Friday. So very, very short term, expecting a move from Huya to move to the upside, but not looking for a huge move because the stock's already trading around 23.30. And they're buying the 24 strike calls that expire on Friday. Those are going for about 60 cents. So is this a possibility that this stock can make a further move to the upside? Sure, it's a possibility. And we see about 4,700 of those trading today. So there's a little unusual option activity for you where we're showing what's going on in a name that's contrary to what we're seeing in the markets right now, where you've got the NASDAQ down, you've got the Dow down. I'm looking at volatility is still trading about flat, but you also have the S&P down a little bit as well. So there's an interesting one that really did stand out when I'm seeing a little bit of bearish activity, but we're seeing some bullish activity, and we're very, very early into the trading day. We'll see how this plays out as we get further into the trading session, but certainly Huya stood out for me early on. As a matter of fact, I put it in order, so I'll let you know, and I'll update that if I'm positioned in there as well. That's something I was looking at just before I came on. Folks, have a great day of trading. Knowledge is king. You've got to understand what's in front of you. You got to understand the catalysts that are in front of you, but also the mechanics of what's going on in the derivatives world, which is where the growth is. Folks, we have the best in the business here at Market Rebellion, so get educated. That's the first step, and then you can start to dip your toe in and understand and start to get that feel and understand what's going on and why we're so excited about the derivatives world here at Market Rebellion. Have a great day of trading.